Scions of the Southland for August 13th, 2024. Welcome to your occasionally weekly update on Georgia Tech culture, sports, construction, trivia. I don't know, add it to the list, but anything Georgia Tech, we got it for you. My name is Akshay Easwaran, and joining me today from the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia, are Jack Purdy and Jake Grant. How are you today, gentlemen?
Tired.
We all had a weekend. We all had a weekend.
Jack's
It
had a
was
heck of it like 3 weeks.
This is true. I wasn't home for 17 days and slept very well the last two nights. Now that I am actually home,
Oh, I
after
believe it.
Jack. Actually, let's start today's show off. Let's talk a little bit about your travails, your
sure,
travels,
sure.
your experiences across those last 17 days. Walk me through the flight plan here.
So long story short, went to Paris for a week for the first week of the Olympic Games. After the first weekend, we got there the first Monday of the games. The entire travel plan is quite something. Because we had an event we all were together in the Northeast part of the United States this weekend. After I got back, what I did was I drove up there, left my car in Maryland, took a train to New York, flew to Keflavik, which then flew me to Paris. Stayed in Paris for a week, flew back to Keflavik, enjoyed Iceland for a couple days. Iceland's fantastic, by the way. Uh, Flew back to New York, took the train back to my car in Maryland, recovered from post travel sickness for 3 days in Maryland, and then went up to Philadelphia, enjoyed some time up there, and then drove down to Durham, and then drove to Atlanta.
Yeah,
All that,
incredibly
yeah.
sicko stuff, right?
It was
Let's be clear.
it was a lot. I am so fortunate that the only part of this plan that went wrong was that my brother's fiance accidentally booked my boarding pass under my uh not a legal name. I do not go by my legal name, and that caused a kerfuffle with TSA for about 2 minutes. And so once they got changed over, it was fine. But literally every other part of the plan went to plan, which I am just thrilled that I managed to pull something off like that for a 17-day trip. And get
Yeah.
sick in the middle of it, and nothing went wrong with that. Like I still got sick, and things were fine.
What events did you end up seeing at the Olympics?
I
I've
saw
read
women's.
your article, but I now want you to explain your
No,
article.
please, yeah, it's fine. I saw the last day women's rugby, which included that really long run by the U.S. in the bronze medal match to win. That moment was so freaking cool to see. Um, we saw Spain and Brazil play women's soccer in their group stage match, not their elimination stage match, where I got to see Marta cleat a girl in the face and get a straight red card. That was a moment to witness. We went and saw a couple field hockey games, women's field hockey, including the U.S., who is not good at field hockey at all. I was surrounded by many British people, and I feared for my independence in that moment. And then we saw archery. So mixed archery. Archery was cool. In that it's archery is cool in that you get to see like just how precise they are. It's very hard to watch because the arrow just moves too fast. You can't see it until it's on the target. Um, but Paris was a great city for the Olympics. Like it's big enough to contain it and still be itself at the same time. But you could tell it's very interesting to be in a city where everything is focused on just one thing. Like it was just that everywhere, and that's a cool. We don't have that in Atlanta. A lot of cities don't have that. People are just doing their own thing, but everyone doing this thing at the same time is a really cool thing to experience at a city that large and historic.
It's just a phenomenal setting too. And there are other places that have moments like the B-roll for Rio over like the mountains and the sea. That was pretty good. But
Yeah,
like the sights of Paris, the river, the museums, the buildings, the Eiffel Tower, of course, like,
the poop
the
stream.
just the poop stream. Yeah. Sidebar. The Irish 800 freestyle winner saying automatically qualifying for the 10K and being like, sure, I'll do it. And then being like, that was the worst thing ever from a guy who's used to swimming in no current, nice clean box. And then you're just
Yeah,
like fighting the current one way for 2 hours.
it's
Oh
so
man.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeesh.
He had an experience. I'm sure he had loads of fun in the River Seine. Surely,
Many people are saying that they did too. So,
Yes. Yeah.
many
Yes.
people,
uh,
certainly.
but
But yeah,
All right.
it was a crazy time. It was a crazy time. Would do it again.
I mean, look, if you do it again, it'll be in LA 2028, which had a fascinating little handoff ceremony for it, including a Tom Cruise stunt bike appearance and a rappelling down from the stealing of Stade de France appearance,
Yes. Yes.
and an appearance by Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. A lot of appearances. A
The
lot of
entire all the Red
appearances.
Hot Chili Peppers. They played. There was like a
All
remote.
four. All
Yeah.
four types of peppers
Yes.
represented. All of them red
Yeah.
hot and chili.
It was a weird little closing ceremony. I must admit it wasn't as the dancing performance was as I would expect for any opening closing ceremony. There was also their only chance to like do that kind of thing because the opening ceremony was all in the sun and it was kind of a made for TV event, less than a in person thing. And it was raining during the
Yeah.
opening ceremonies. People that were like there to watch were just getting drenched watching boats float by for 3 hours, basically. Uh,
Oh, I had a great time on my couch. I stayed perfectly
I
dry,
know that's the right place to
and
do it.
it was fantastic.
Anyways, what else is going on? We got a show here.
Well, yeah, we got a show. We've been talking about the Olympics for now going on 5, 10 minutes, but we do have a show. A couple of other notes before we get going. Coach Brent Key's weekly radio show will be back at New Realm Brewing in Atlanta starting next Tuesday on the 20th. So check that out. I think the radio partner is 92.9 The Game. And then also, if you're in town, just go to New Realm Brewing, who is the official alcohol beverage sponsor of Georgia Tech Athletics. I don't know what the official name is. One of you knows it. We're going to move right alongside
Close enough.
the incredibly corpo partnership names. Move In has started on campus. The freshmen are in this week. And then the upperclassmen will be in at the end of the week. So students will be back on campus. They will emerge from their summer cocoons to see a half constructed, I guess a half under construction slash half demolished edge hole. Not really a building. It's just kind of
It's
a
really.
hole.
I finally walked by it today, and there's only a couple like steel things left in the ground, but otherwise they have cleared out most of the debris. And so if you walk by it, you can like see like pretty far in where they've started digging to lay foundation for the Fanning Center. So to what dawned on me today was truly just how much space there was that was taken up by that building. Like it feels like it's like massive chasm of just like, oh, that was a
yeah.
building that was there. Like there's a lot of space just open there. I think we brought up on the pod here, but I'm very curious how this affects the wind inside the stadium because it's just going to be a big old open tunnel right there that you could get a wind gust that could throw off Aiden Burr or whoever ends up kicking in the stadium. So
Stadium pulse cranked up to 10.
yes,
That's all I'm saying.
So
yes,
luckily the winds tend to move pretty solidly east to west, maybe a slight like southeast. So
okay,
a northeasterly or a wind out of the northeast would be pretty exceedingly rare. I would
okay,
have to guess. And maybe it depends on time of year and weather systems. If there's a hurricane, I mean, we were getting storms kind of moving backwards, if you will, during the tropical storm last week. But
right,
I don't know if it was the opposite corner, and it is kind of open in that corner, but there's a lot of tree cover in the alumni house direction.
right,
That would
right.
probably be the like, oh man, like
Mm-hmm,
something's
mm-hmm.
about to change type of change. But the stadium's relatively open in especially the other two southern corners. So you know
Yeah,
that I
fair.
don't know how much it would do too much, but
What
who
this
who
does
knows? We
allow,
haven't played like that in years,
I
so.
know there's enough open. I haven't fully looked at this, but I think there's enough open space to where if you stand at the right part along Techwood, you could just look into the stadium and see the scoreboard and just watch the game that way.
That's what the
Well,
people on the renovated fire truck should do. Just grab a couple Porsche chairs put them
Yes,
on top
just
of the
sit there.
fire truck,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
align it so that you can see straight through the stadium.
That'd be
That'd be
great.
great. It'd be a
Yes.
massive ACC rights violation, but you know, who is there was a whole lawsuit about this recently with I think Wrigley Field, but we don't have to delve into that. What we can delve into is the Georgia Tech program with its most recent Olympic medalist, a bronze medal from Brazil, courtesy of Julia Bergman, and that would be the Georgia Tech women's volleyball program. It is preview season. The athletics year is finally about to begin again. This will be Georgia Tech volleyball's 11th season under Michele Collier. And last season was pretty good. 27 and or 24 and 7, excuse me, a Sweet 16 loss to Nebraska, but it came immediately after defeating Florida on the road in Gainesville in one of the top wins in program history. A complex season, I think. We very complicated in terms of vibes and performance. Even if that top line 24 and 7 record is, very, very good. Jack, do you want to tell us a little bit about the circumstances that
Right.
played
Yeah.
out through the season?
Well, for one, it was the first post Julia season, and there was a lot of like, how do you replace? I mean, you could probably say the best offensive player ever in Tech history. How do you go about that? Came about in that Bianca Bertolino stepped up massively and became one of the best servers in
Yeah.
the country and became one of the most lethal outside hitters in the country and one of the and just all around like and her defense was incredible too. Um, what was weird was, or I guess what threw a wrench in the system was that Liv Mogridge, who took over as our main starting middle blocker, had a knee injury against Virginia Tech mid-season and threw off the rhythm a little bit. We were managed to still win some tight games, but against teams that we shouldn't be going to 5 sets against, and there was just a torrid amount of 5 setters in the middle of the season. Um, and so Anna Bosie and Deandra Pierce to play even more points than I think than they had planned on. Bella D'Amico at one point, her setting touch, especially against Wake Forest, just kind of just disappeared. Like, don't know what happened there. But Eloise Suarez was then had to go play a bunch of minutes too, and it created the 6-2 thing that was happening. It was mid season. It was like, okay, what's going on here? Because we don't have our middle blocker, and we're having the sub
They
all the time.
they had to do some capital F like figuring it out. The 6-2 is a great example of that. And I
Yeah,
wish I had like height distribution stats on the middle blocking, but in my head I'm like, oh yeah, Deandra Pierce, short, Anna Boise, short. They're 6'1" and 6'2". Like they're not actually that short, but compared to Liv and some of the, experience we've had up in the middle in recent seasons, like you could see a difference.
yeah,
And I guess, Mogridge was also our top middle blocking option. There's a reason why that changed, and
yeah, yeah.
it's subbing in your twos for your one. Before I forget, because I inevitably will, I'm looking at the roster right now, and great addition to the roster page on RamblinRack.com. I want to give whoever thought of this their flowers. They have the audio pronunciations of all the
Yeah.
players next to the
Yep.
rosters for,
Hmm.
I mean, maybe not all of them, but certainly a lot of ones where you might be wondering what that is. So I do want to give them their flowers on that, which is completely unrelated to the point I was making. So apologies for that. But thank you for allowing me to derail briefly.
What is this podcast if not a serious collection of detours? But to get us back on
Informed
track,
detours.
informed detours, surely, of course. I think another piece of the season was that in and around this kind of, I don't know, it feels mean to call it a malaise, but like when you stack a bunch of those 5 set very close wins versus the likes of like Wake Forest and Virginia and those types of opponents, it does, I think,
It added
definitionally
up.
end up
It,
being a malaise. But it's somewhere in the
I mean,
middle
the way we
there.
talked about it, yeah, right?
Yeah. And the way that I'm referring to it, yes.
yeah,
Let's
I mean,
be
it
clear.
got hard. I mean, eventually they lost to Miami again, which is just annoying that we lose to Miami every year it seems. But like at that point of the season, they were burnt out, and they were just getting gashed in the middle, game after game after game, and
And it
finding
was a
ways to live
3-0
around that.
loss to Miami too. Like
Oh
that
yeah, no,
that
it,
being
it
it was
was like
uncompetitive.
it was a game we never
Yeah.
really had a true shot. Like it was like this feels right. We've beating Florida State was great, but just that was about it. that was all we really had left in the tank at that point. Which is fine. In long, but then it came down November. We're the number 10 team in the country. Louisville comes to town as the number 3. I'm worried we're about to get absolutely just destroyed by them because again, still no Mogridge back. Mogridge basically didn't play until the end of the season. Uh, and Bosie and Pierce have the game of their lives if we beat them 3-1. And the loudest I have personally been inside O'Keefe Gymnasium, like by far. I wish there was historic decibel readings because that place was rocking in a way that I have never seen it rock.
I think the
I think it's
interesting thing about that
interesting.
game, we're
Akshay?
going to say probably the same
No,
thing.
no, we're not going to say
No,
the same thing
probably not.
because you lived in San Francisco, but the thing I was saying, it's
Okay.
interesting that Louisville and Notre Dame are travel partners because the only other time I can remember that comes close is 20, I think it was 19, the year they won the NIVC. Tech beat Notre Dame coming off like like will they be included? And it was that loud. It
Mm-hmm.
was that loud in O'Keefe, but the game didn't mean nearly as much. Well, maybe it did because they're kind of like bubble, but on the wrong
Yeah.
side looking in. But like the fact that it was Louisville number 3, a team that's had Tech's GOAT for like 6 years through to that point, like straight,
It
the
was
best team in the conference, like that is
yeah.
probably the most significant home win they've ever had.
It was
There,
it
I'd
was the
say.
best home it was the best home win just in terms of pure high ranking of a team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
It's
add this too. It was also a pretty resounding win insofar as Tech did a really good job of just completely freezing out Louisville's best players,
Yeah.
including Anna DeBeer,
yes.
who I haven't watched a lot of volleyball, right? But I've watched enough ACC volleyball to know that Anna DeBeer, very good volleyball player.
It
He
was weird.
looked absolutely cooked.
Her and
It
Aiko
was
Jones just did not
shocking.
have they did not have the games that they usually do. Like it was truly
Well,
remarkable.
and that's the thing too. I think one thing you got to caveat a lot of what we say is like we say a lot of this through obviously a Georgia Tech lens, but an ACC lens as well. That's what we watch. That's what we see the most of.
Mhm.
We are 3, not amateurs by any means, but like that we say what we know, and and we'll get to Nebraska in a sec, I assume, but like Louisville is the class of the conference. They figured them out. They played them accordingly. We've had games like Pitt and or against Pitt in past years where it all comes together. They play a great game or a great couple of sets, but you know I think that at the end of the day, if you look at the rest of the games against similar caliber teams, yes, they had to go to the L&N Federal Credit Union House of Pain. They lost 3-1 there. They, took a 3-0 loss to Pitt at home. Not too fun there. That obviously the reverse sweep on the road with some asterisks and whatnot with the health. But it's one of those things where I think, and we'll get to questions, expectations of that too. That's the class of the conference. Georgia Tech gets 1 or 2 of them a year. They did it last year. Put them in great position coming down the stretch. But that's where we kind of sit ourselves when we say, hey, 24-7, not a bad overall record, but there's clearly, I would say, a 1A, a 1B, and then Georgia Tech, and they showed us that last year, and they didn't really have the depth at certain key spots to, make up for the fact that Bianca Bertolino was scary and amazing, or obviously other people deserve their flowers too, but
Mhm.
that it was a really really good year. But we've seen enough really, really good years in a row now that I think that's where Akshay's like, oh, malaise
Yeah,
commentary
no, no.
comes in.
I think we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. It was a very good year, but not an elite year. And I think in the couple of seasons before, we saw that they had a ceiling of being elite, right? Whereas in this year, their ceiling ended up being, and yes, it's a ceiling that ended up being, I realize the problems with saying it like that, but their ceiling ended up being just very, very good instead of elite, that Louisville, Pittsburgh tier,
Yeah, it was
right? And I
a
think that,
weird. It's a weird mix where we had the elite wins with a team that I think we knew wasn't exactly going to be a threat to make the Elite Eight or the Final Four in any way. Like
Yeah.
Compared to previous years, it's like okay, where they couldn't get over the Pitt and Louisville hump, but we knew they had the tools to make a deep run and also didn't. So I think
Well,
based on what we knew about the team, it didn't match exactly what happened. But I think that also points to like they've stayed good enough long enough to make themselves relevant in just about any game now at this point too. So which gives me hope this year.
and here's the thing. Tech finished the season ranked in the AVCA coaches poll. And obviously, one guy's advanced stats isn't everything. But if you look at the numbers, quote unquote, if you will, Husker Geek, very respected and now analyst on this, somebody we lean on a lot, really only had Georgia Tech at 26th overall in Viper, which is their, metric. And Evolve, another, advanced metric that we lean on just for perspective, had Tech at 20th in their Evolve rating. Ergo, I would say that Georgia Tech is at a place now where it receives the benefit of the doubt from the coaches poll based on the, I guess, long arc body of work, if that makes sense.
It's
And I
about
think
it,
that
yeah.
Georgia Tech does enough to sustain that. And it did enough to sustain that reputation last year, especially with the giant Julia Bergman sized hole and questions at middle blocker for a big chunk of the year. And now the question is, can they build on hey, Georgia Tech, maybe their reputation outperformed their performance? I don't know if that's a fair way to put that. You
Well,
guys can wordsmith
let's
it, but
again, yeah, well, yes, there is that. They also played the schedule that that was like notable. They won three straight rate games between beating Penn State and Ohio State twice early in the season. Like they had earned their way into a high top 10 ranking. They
yeah,
did the work they had to do that. Now
yep.
that the rest of the story plays out where the injuries get weird and we nearly beat Pitt. Like
Oh
we
yeah,
were like as safe for that weird Georgia game where Sophia Fisher just kind of single handedly just destroyed our offense. That this team it was a one loss team going into Pitt and nearly stayed a one loss team coming out of Pitt. Like
yeah.
they did those things I think that warrant that like eye test doesn't perfectly match the numbers so to say, and I think that's kind of just where they live
And
in
and
that regard.
absolutely, like they lost to the quote unquote under ranked Miami UGA. That's three of the seven, and the others are Pitt, Louisville, and Nebraska. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
an
yeah,
insane year. They had the 16th hardest strength of record in the country. They didn't
yeah,
lose to a
yeah.
non-group one team, which means that even among those quote unquote less good teams, UGA,
And
Miami,
they
they're
nearly
all
did
in
like
group one.
five to
And
and they
and
nearly
here's
did
a
five times.
stat. They didn't play a single game against a team from Quad 4 in the entire year.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of remarkable. And I know it sounds like I'm kind of going all over the place for this, but these are all data points, right? They're all data points that feed this like so what? And my question, I think, kind of leading like towards the future here, like they were good. So what? What comes next? Is that a fair way to kind of pivot this kind of towards this year?
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the things that you said there is important, right? They've built up this whole inertia with the coaches, and now it's a chance. I think every year, especially given the schedule that they have a chance to show, okay, if we can break into being instead of a consistent top 25 team, or even maybe a top 20 team, if we want to draw the line there, we can break into that next rung, the top 16 or the top 10 or wherever else you want to draw the line, given their poll inertia and given the schedule. Um, and I think this leads into a very nice segue into talking about how they are going to do that. Let's talk a little bit about who left first. Isabella D'Amico graduated. Solomon Mantel also graduated. Smiley Manyang graduated. This is going to be easier if I just read off who transferred as well. Carabianco, Callie Engeman, Darren Shirker, and Michaela White all transferred, and then Liz Patterson also graduated. So you have a pretty significant amount of minutes. To put it in soccerisms, like a pretty significant amount of minutes, especially off your starting seven that are no longer with the program. So you
Yeah,
need to I mean, this comes down to a program building thing. It's like, do you fit
And
for role or do you fit
and
for a number of points like that you're trying to replace an aggregate? And it's an interesting problem to solve here. But
well,
Jake, you're
that's a
moving.
really interesting way to put it. Do you replace the points in aggregate? Because by far the most important losses on this are Bella D'Amico and Paolo Pimentel, two specialist role players who don't show up in those attacking points side of the ledger very often. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredibly rare for that to even happen. And I kind of workshopped this point before we went in and hit record. And I feel like, the defensive specialist, the libero, is almost like the quarterback equivalent when you think about camp, right? It's the Georgia Tech has had the Maddie Tippett and Paula Pimentel consistency at that position for going on what, 5, 6 years now? Like that's a long time to not have to worry about that. And if that's the person that's always on the floor when you're playing defense, coming in and out, playing with a lot of different lineups, and one where you kind of got to be locked in because you're the primary defender, reception, and add on to that set in which Bella D'Amico like seamlessly took over for Maddie McKissick after a similar long like decorated tenure. These are not like points or minutes you have to replace. This is like technique, dexterity,
Yeah.
the floor general, if you will. Right?
And I
That's
think
that's that's the two scariest positions to replace, and we got to do it all at once. Fair?
right. And I think you have to pick players where the pieces fit, right? I think it's something that
Yeah.
that you've seen talked about a lot in soccer is where you want to stack. I mean, it is a puzzle, right? You want players with profiles that fit together, and you want, especially given the pieces that you already have. You have Bianca Bertolino, you have Larissa Mendez, you have Eloise Suarez, who's a setter, backup setter, but still, it's like you want to, and tomorrow tonight, whom I've forgotten until now, but like you want to take their strengths and then find ways to cover up their weaknesses with the two players that you slot in there, right? And the ways that you do that, to your point, are finding ways to move the ball around, like not just the dexterity, not just the athleticism, but like those players can be really good up front and in the back, but you have to get them the ball. And this is where those two, you have to get them the ball and also prevent the ball from hitting ground, obviously.
Mhm.
So this is where those two players that you now have to slot in come into play. It's like, and maybe this is a different way of thinking about replacing an aggregate, right? At those two positions, what what skills do you need to what skills do you need to have there, and how do you account for them in different ways in order to fill that gap? I think it ends up being a really interesting team building exercise. Um, and there are a couple players that could fit these roles. I think two of them that have come up in early conversations, especially as we talk about transfers too. Luana Emiliano, who comes to Tech from UT Rio Grande Valley as a setter, and then Sofia Velez, who's a JUCO transfer, who comes in at that defensive specialist libero position. It's like two players that, like, if just looking at the positions, so they just start sort of plug and play. But I think, maybe we take a look at that first scrimmage that's coming up on Friday and say, okay, they those same positions a little differently. And does that cover the same gap? Right?
Well,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Sure. I think another thing here is like, as you mentioned, like both D'Amico and Pimentel were mainstays in the starting lineup. Like they were as crucial as anyone that in that lineup. You could get away with maybe Berlito or Otsay just having an off night because there's other people back behind them to fill in the attacking gaps and stuff like that. Like they
Yep.
plenty of depth there. There was thank goodness for Eloise Suarez last year as the backup to
Yeah.
D'Amico and like and at times was like actually a plus setter and did the job necessary to keep us alive in the season. Like that without Suarez, last season is just toast. Like it just
It's
doesn't happen
cooked.
the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It goes
it's not good.
sideways.
And Pimentel kept getting better. Like she had used her fifth year and like was still getting actively better and becoming a just he was the leader. Like between her and D'Amico, you have the two leaders of the team. Those are between those two and Patterson. Those are in terms of important locker room voices, those were three of the tops, if not the three top last year. And you
Yeah.
lose all of those right now, which goes into, I think they went on the more experienced route to replace them right now
Yep.
with Emiliano and Velez. They both got playing experience. They both got, I mean, I talked with Collier today, which that interview will come up later. Like they both have the leadership capabilities that are needed to be on a team like this, especially in a tech environment where it's like you can't really get away with going to tech without being a leader of some sort as well, whether it's your personal leader, like leader just leading yourself to a spot or others. And I think that was a priority there. Is like making sure they have people who are proven to fill in those gaps while the talent is still developing. Especially with defensive specialists, because Standon's great, but she was not like clearly at the Pimentel level of like, oh, great to be a starter.
And is there something about defensive specialists and liberos coming from JUCO? Because that's where Collier found
Yeah, yeah.
Pimentel as
That was
well. Like
I
that.
had a direct question about that in the interview. That will be on Friday. So yeah,
Good. Well, listen to that.
the answer is
I'll
there.
listen to at my desk. That'll be in my podcast queue. So
Um,
we'll all find out together. I
I'll point
assume
out
it's about.
I'll point out in
I,
general though. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say I assume it's about the same logic we can take with the incoming of Paolo Pimentel those years ago behind Tippett. But the thing again is that happened kind of mid-year, early. Like there's a known quantity there, and the difference,
Yeah.
at least I think coming in here is as far as like she's in the mix, dare I say, as somebody who's coming back. The defensive specialist role feels, at least to me, you know,
It's important.
wide
It's important.
wide open.
And also like we can, I mean, keep in mind our defensive development with Claudio Pinheiro is, I mean, good luck finding a better guy in the country right now with that. Like we can take, I mean, Breland Morissette was on no one's radar and then became one of the most important middle blockers in the country and now has a pro career in Turkey. Like they can turn some people they can turn nobodies into stars. Like they have that, like that is I was talking with Michelle about this, like what's our money ball? Like that is the money ball of tech, is the development and stuff like that. Like that is the thing. Throughout the year, I think we will see both of them make real strides, which I'm really excited about. We've got a few more additions here. I don't know if you're about to go into those actually or not.
No, go for it.
Yeah, so we got Logan Wiley, who I mentioned on the pod before. She enrolled early. She's gonna be a middle blocker. She was one of the most like highly rated middle blockers coming out of high school nationally. She won basically everything you can out of Alpharetta High School. So really excited about her. Will she play that much? I mean, probably not. Keep in mind that these are kids who were playing high school volleyball, which is much slower. The people are not as large, and now you're getting thrust into ACC volleyball, which is about as hard as it gets. And we have Stanford on the schedule twice. So go
Harder than it used to be, too.
Imagine from playing like Berkmar High School to playing Stanford University in a 12-month span. Like not the same. Not the
Jack,
same
I've
thing.
never even heard of that high school. I'm not gonna lie to you.
That's fine. That's fine.
I don't
That's
think
fine.
I've heard of it either.
Berkmar? Okay, well, all right. And then we got Lydia Zhang and Myra McCool. Lydia Zhang, defensive specialist, libero. Myra McCool is a middle blocker, right side. Long story short, you're probably not going to see him this year. If you want to see him play, come to the scrimmage on Saturday because that's probably as much action as they're going to get, just because the roster is the roster. There was a ranked priority there at who gets playing time. So, and it's usual for Collier freshmen to not get much playing time unless you're truly a one of a kind, as Mendez was last year, and Suarez in a many pinches as was necessary.
I think to that point, though, one of the things that we saw a lot last year, and yes, this was a tactical thing, and maybe that's something that we can talk about as well, is that because of some of the sets that Collier wanted to run, Mendez got a lot more time, Suarez got a lot more time, and you saw, and not just them, you saw a little bit more depth develop, right? We saw Laura Fisher play a lot more minutes than she had in years past. And yes, Laura Fisher now is a senior, so like the analogy doesn't necessarily work as well, but you sort of get what I'm saying. It's that she has trended towards, to her credit, she's trended towards trusting a larger and larger portion of her roster as this era, let's say the last, like the Mariana Marbia, the Julia Bergman, that era forward of Georgia Tech volleyball has evolved. right? She's found that she has a deeper and deeper roster, and she's throwing those players more and more into the heat of like the actual game situations. I think there's a lot of value in that, especially as it's a long season, right? You can start with the same seven, but you do need to find the second or third or fourth
Right.
trick, especially against some of those like that 1A, 1B of the ACC, and now like a 1A, 1B, 1C, right?
Yeah.
With Stanford. So,
And and this year, 65% of our roster is a junior or higher in terms of experience, which is it feels like more than usual for us. Also, the roster's not as large as it has been in the past. It's at 17 players right now. They might get to 18. We'll see. But yeah, I think that idea of like the expanding. I mean, and Michelle talked about it last year too. Of like, okay, maybe I'll play more folks this year, and she did out of necessity, but I think out of choice as well. But like, yeah, as I mentioned, all these players get better when you play at Tech. Like Leah Harper is not the same. Like if we see Leah Harper and Laura Fisher play this year, I don't think it's going to be the same version of those that we have in our heads of those players who can come in against maybe weaker opponents or just fill in when we just need a point or two here and there. Like they've gotten better. They've surely gotten better. That's just what happens when you play for us. We saw with Bernalino more than anybody last year, who looked like a completely different player after her sophomore season and going into her junior season. And who the heck knows how she looks now? I think that's what I'm as excited for as anything on Saturday to see. Is just like, okay, how hard do you hit the ball now? Like, are we hitting Bergman levels? Like, where are you at? Like this. Will I be scared for my face if I'm on the other side of the court from where you were hitting a volleyball? Because I might be. And they look at the schedule. They gonna need to do the same thing they did last year, which is win a couple games they ain't supposed to, probably to do some damage.
yeah, let's talk about the schedule. Let's play everyone's favorite game, the schedule game, shall we? I have the
Yay!
full
No shame
schedule
in that.
pulled up. We're going to shamelessly steal bits as we've always done. Uh, Again, the schedule starts on Saturday. I think I said Friday earlier, but it starts on Saturday with the Golden White scrimmage, and then it goes straight into other power opponents after another scrimmage versus Auburn for the home opener, and the season opener is versus UCLA. The Big Ten's UCLA, of course, on the 30th of August.
Yeah,
New Mexico State right after that, and Coastal Carolina soon after. Lipscomb at BYU versus Florida versus South Alabama, Alabama State, then on the road in Athens versus SMU, by the way, which I don't actually think we have on our highlights.
That is our ACC
opener at home versus SMU. And then in that same weekend, they play Pitt at home at 1:30. Also important to mention here.
Good SMU team, by the way.
Yeah.
Good tournament quality, like ranking quality.
26th ranked at the end of the year. Yeah, 26.
And then the following week, it'll be 2 away games at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has typically been very tricky. And then at the L&N Credit Union House of Pain,
yes,
right, in Louisville. It really, and then you get a bit of a lull, right? VT, Virginia, Clemson twice, NC State, Wake Forest, at Duke, at UNC, and then the final. How many fixtures of this is this? Then it goes into the final month of the season, which is on the West Coast twice. Cal, at Stanford, then home versus Cuse, home versus Boston College, at Tallahassee, at Miami, and then Stanford at home and away to Pitt to end the season. It is tough. And for the record, season tickets are sold out, by the way. So you cannot get a ticket to all of these games, as I unfortunately found out very recently.
Yep. You can buy tickets
because you forgot to renew yours, genius.
Genius is right. That's what I've always called myself. And all of the ACC slate, if I'm reading this properly, is sold out. Yep. So in addition to that, so your only tickets that are available here are go see them on the road, which is your prerogative. I trust that you have good decision making, or go to the Georgia Tech Classic, or
Coastal,
buy a ticket for the McCamish game versus Florida on September 11th at 7 p.m.
Labor
So,
Day versus Coastal still available too.
oh yeah, the GT Invitational
Yeah.
is also an option. I didn't scroll that far up, but
Man.
all of those are your your two options. If you don't want to
Yeah.
go see them away, like it's a hard ticket to find. This might be the
Man,
most capacity utilized sport in the city at this point.
if if they didn't play Clemson at 3 p.m. on a Friday, oh man, that'd be a good out
It'd be
and
a fun
back
road
quick
trip.
trip.
I
Oh,
know. Yeah. Yeah.
I like a good oddball like non football Clemson road trip to mix in there. But that's a different podcast,
This is
different topic.
a very strange scheduling quirk that they play Clemson home and away in the same week. Like not even the same week,
Oh
the
man.
same 72-hour period.
They don't. Yeah, they just don't play the weekend that week. They just do a Wednesday,
Yep.
Friday thing, knock it back to back. Yeah,
Fascinating.
interesting. Yeah,
I
this is a weird schedule.
Fascinating.
We also have we have some TV implications working here. Like the
yep.
college volleyball is, as we all, if you look at the stats, far more volleyball. Sorry, not there is far more volleyball on television, far more popular right now than it has ever been. So there are more. If you're seeing weird times and weird days in the schedule, it's probably television. That's the primary factor here, and not just your regular 7 p.m. on a Friday, 1 p.m. on a Sunday scheduling thing going on.
God,
Uh,
10 p.m. Like, look, 10 p.m. November 8th and 9th is just an insane tip-off time. I
it,
understand that
No, it's not.
it's 7 on the West Coast, but
yeah,
like, oh my God, that is
it's still,
so
yeah,
late.
No,
still, yeah.
I have no issue with doing a 7 p.m. local time for two schools that just want to get people in their building. Like,
We just
eh,
And I mean, like,
off the top of my head, when have we watched Georgia Tech start a game any later than 8 p.m. Eastern time? Like that just is a thing that doesn't really happen
we
ever.
played loads of
Hawaii
basketball games
last
that tip
year.
of 9.
I've been to
Okay,
games
okay,
that tip at 9 at McCamish
okay, that's
too.
right. I
Like
forgot. Okay,
that's
I forgot about those. But uh, like we're just not doing games out west, just in general.
No, to
All
your point,
yeah,
they've
yeah,
not. The Hawaii Invitational that men's basketball did, and I think women's basketball did it a couple of years ago too. Is
yeah.
basically it. And I mean, it's not like these are bad fixtures. Like
No,
it
like the
should be a
schedule is
pretty
hard.
hot ticket.
The
Like
schedule's
for
hard. Yeah,
Stanford or for Tech at Stanford, and then the reverse fixture obviously is sold out, right? Stanford
yeah.
at Tech is sold out. So like it's a very difficult schedule, and I think this is something that we've talked about with the scheduling model that the ACC goes to for volleyball is that teams, like if you're in the top echelon of the ACC, you get this.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't remember if it's an ask or you just get it. It's like you get
They
this, and
it
your RPI is just baseline high enough. If you win the
that's the
games that you're
idea.
supposed to, you
That's
win.
the
If
idea.
you win the games that you're supposed to, your RPI is high enough to where you are in the tournament picture bare minimum. It's just where do you want to be in that tournament picture? That it just depends on your wins. And so, and
Before
this
yeah.
team, like we said, is very good. Like they will most likely be very good again. It's just where do they fall with an incredibly hard schedule in a conference that's added to at least two very good volleyball teams.
Yeah. I want to make
I'd
this
say
note.
3.
Yeah, you could probably say 3. Before we move on to like the lineups and stuff like that, I want to make note the final week of November. This 4-day stretch is going to make us feel things. Wednesday, we host Stanford in volleyball. Thursday, Thanksgiving, watch football, have fun. Friday, complete old fashioned hate at Athens. Saturday, Tech Pitt in volleyball. Like there is a lot of make or breaking of our seasons happening in a 4-day stretch right there between the two
Let me pose
sports.
something to you. Let me pose something to you real quick, and this is a complete aside. Like, and we I will probably cut this later on. But Jack, do you remember Thanksgiving or like the week of Thanksgiving in 22, where there was both a full slate of college football and then also the opening games of the World Cup in the
Yes,
exact same
I
week
do.
in basically the same windows? So
I I
imagine
yes, I
if
remember watching Brazil while eating Thanksgiving dinner. Yes,
So
yes,
imagine that
uh
exact same setup in this slot. Just
yeah.
your brain would
It's
melt out of your ears with the
I
amount of sport that would be on at the same time.
yeah.
and it's only a couple days later that they get or usually I should say, a couple days later that they get that men's basketball UGA fixture. I'll remind you. So that's coming up. That
Yeah, true,
we got
true.
some SEC, ACC challenges in there. I know maybe not the same, but that's it.
It's going to be
If
a dense time. I'm going to be writing many thousands of words that in those few days. I got a feeling.
We got to do pre-writes for every possible outcome.
Yes, that works.
sounds like a
Even
That
more,
great
was
use of
fun.
time.
even more thousands of words.
Yeah.
Hey, it's your
Um,
time, not mine. But let's talk about the let's talk about our expected starting seven. I think three, maybe four of these slots kind of write themselves. Bertolino,
yeah.
Atene, Mendez, and Magric. I think those four slots write themselves. I think
Yep.
up for grabs that second middle blocker spot. That I mean, and then the setter, and then the libero spots. Those three slots, I think, are entirely up for grabs. In this document, I forget who was working with me on this. I think it was you, Jack.
Yep.
You have Velez slotted in here over Sandin for the libero spot.
For
What
now,
is your vibe on that?
yeah, yeah. For now, I mean, a lot of my vibe is gonna be based on what happens at the scrimmage as well on Saturday, because I have not actually seen Fellas play. Emiliano did play a bunch in the spring scrimmages that happened. I saw her do quite well, etc. Like I think that's considering that they got a senior who knows what she's doing. I think they're gonna go with that over Suarez for now, at least to start games. Um, Lauren Sandin, good at libero, very good defense. I don't. She never got to start though. She never played an extended run last year, so I'm not sure if they want to move forward with that quite yet. And then DeAndre Pierce, DeAndre Pierce got that middle blocking starting spot when Mogridge was out. I don't see why she loses that unless Pierce made unless Bosey made a massive jump I'm not aware of. And I have no expectation that Logan Wiley is going to play much beyond just spot points here and there. So I'm not really factoring her in that much. But then again, and basically it's basically something on Saturday that changes my mind. But yeah, Lana Emiliano, et cetera, I think is a strong candidate. That libero spot, uh, Velez knows what she's doing. I think so. I think we'll be. In either
Yeah.
case, I think we'll be fine. I think in either case, I'm happy with either. Like Sandin did just show that like she could do the job. Like she did the job at times last year. But yeah, I think as you also mentioned in the doc, like you don't bring in an older player and then just don't play them. Also, like
Yeah.
that's not a that's last year. Mannion came in. She wasn't a starter, but she played plenty as an experienced grad transfer that came in. Doesn't happen for all the people, but I think we'll get some Velas time in there. So yeah, that's what we got. It's
Cool.
pretty much the offensive core is the exact same. Like they're gonna hit a lot of
The
posts. They're
engine
gonna
room
want to
is the
kills.
exact same, more
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
I don't know. Engine room doesn't. I don't know if that quite fits, but your main point generation people are
Yep,
basically the exact same.
yep,
So it just
yep.
comes down to I think, like we were saying before, it's just how do you move the ball around and what profile player slots into those two positions, and how do they cover for that setting and defensive ability. So. Mr. Grant, any additions, any chopping and changing to that projected lineup for you?
Mm, Not too much. I think the like Jack said, the just kind of digging into the first couple of non non-practice, I guess, non off-season content these next couple weeks is going to be, I would say, interesting. UCLA scares me, but they were going to scare me no matter what. And we kind of just have to roll with what we know, right? Like, Bianca Bertolino is going to be there. She's great service. And, after that, it, I'm trying to go into this season with a very positive mindset. I feel like there's a lot to grow off of from the past couple of years. And, you know, Coach Collier, Claudio, they get the benefit of the doubt. They're bringing in talent that they can ID and develop. And from there, positive sports mentality, right?
Do you remember what season was it where Georgia Tech baseball opened with UCLA? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, was that opened or? second week. I think it might have been the second week,
it was
but
early, but
Kyle
it's
Kyle
the same
McCann
thing.
hit a home run into the trees to walk off the game. That had to have been 2019. The most
Yeah, it had to
magical
have been
Georgia
the
Tech, the
special
only
year,
magical Georgia Tech baseball season I can remember.
and it still
But
ended in
no,
tragedy.
I've had this thought rolling around in the back of my mind, and so in 2016, I was very much like a wide-eyed, like, wow, what is this sport? I don't know what's going on. And then in the offseason, I was like, time to study up. And then I applied to From the Rumble seat, and they're like, you're the non-rev guy now. I was like, okay, I got to cover them. And I remember that first year we beat Michigan State, who was ranked early in the year. And I remember that being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. How did that even happen? We lost so many players from last year. And the team went on to be sub 500. And like the perspective difference from that to here, they have built a capital P program. And I say that with the
Oh God, he
particular,
said
like,
program. He
like,
said
He
like
did. He did.
program.
He did. What the heck?
I've been trying to like reminisce on that, especially for like this is the team at Georgia Tech that gets the benefit of the doubt, whether it's from
Other
the
than golf,
coaches or from the ratings. I mean, that too, that was unspoken. If anyone listens to
of
this
course.
podcast for more than 2 weeks, they know that that is also volleyball and golf sit on their own. Like
Yes,
I'm
yes.
eager and nervous. And the fact that I have that for both football and men's basketball and volleyball this year makes me terrified. So I'm trying not to be terrified and trying to enjoy the good vibes while they last. I think, like you said, you don't bring in an older talent if you're not convinced that they can do something. They saw something there. Mogridge and Pierce, you got to kind of trust it at the middle blocker, hope for some development from Mendez. You know what you're getting in Bertolino and Oatney, and you roll with that accordingly. Like that's the team, and you know. I don't see too much reason to second guess or tinker with that too much. It's what Occam's razor applies.
Oh my God, I'm not smart enough to know the logic terms. You're gonna have to define it for me.
The simplest explanation, I believe it's something along the lines of the simplest explanation. You can go with that. That was a very
Yeah.
unartful way to describe that, but I've got 2 engineering degrees, not a philosophy degree. So
No, I think it's definitely that's definitely the case. It's like they set up to be good. They have grown into position to be good. They will probably actually end up being good, regardless of how that talent is deployed. Let's talk a little bit about expectations. Let's talk about what the outcomes could be for this team. My first question for both of you, and I want you to answer this just the first thing that comes to mind, the first answer that comes to mind. How many ACC postseason qualifiers? How many ACC teams make the tournament? Mr. Grant, you're up first.
I think I've got, and this is going to be crazy, 7 locks. I think we'll get 9 based on the conference strength of schedule being that high.
Okay.
I was
So
thinking
you
seven
are
as well.
saying, so let's say Tech, Louisville, uh, who's the other team? The Pittsburgh,
Who's
Stanford.
the other team? Yeah,
It's been a long week. All right. It's Tuesday, Lemon. Anyway,
those are the first
so
4.
okay. Florida State.
Yep.
Who are your
Miami,
other okay, I'll give you Miami.
SMU.
Okay.
Those are my
I think
7.
that
And
plays.
I think somebody in the bucket of gunk that is Cal and
Notre Dame.
UNC and Notre Dame, maybe an NC State, like something, somebody's strength of schedule coming out of that, just from who they have to play and surprise and just a little bit of development. A team or two, I could very well see pop up from that. But that, yeah, and Miami and Florida State are going to be benefited from getting more shots at 3 competent to great teams than having to play UVA or Wake Forest or Syracuse.
Jack, any adjustments you'd make to that?
I don't have any. I think that's pretty much just the nail on the head. Like it's 7 and then see what else happens. I'm looking at Florida State's schedule just for the fun of it. They also play Georgia, in
Ooh,
Tallahassee. They get Miami twice. Stanford, I think, is just a one-time thing. They get SMU twice as well. So they're
So
in
SMU might be in that second block.
looks
then?
like they are.
The
Looks
second
like
block of teams.
SMU and Florida State are in that second block, which is how Florida State won the ACC last year, was by
Yep.
not playing the top tier schedule.
And didn't Miami do that 2 years ago?
Maybe, I don't know, but that
Yeah.
is the way. That is a way the ACC can backdoor their way into an extra team making the tournament. Is just having one of the second group teams winning enough games and being the bottom of the conference, while the top teams just all battle each other out and then lose enough games. But at least that's how that happened last year. May not happen again this year.
Yeah, and I want to point out
this is where the trutherism comes in. So.
I want to point out real quick too, for like a team like Notre Dame, one that's kind of been good enough in the past, but maybe not necessarily recently. You get a Michigan, a Mississippi State, a pair against Northwestern, a pair against Indiana, and then Stanford, Cal Tech, Georgia Tech, I should say, Miami, Florida State, SMU, Pitt, twice against Louisville, and then you've got another against Cal in there, and then a lot of winnable games, winnable ACC games. That's the kind of schedule that, you get a little pop. Maybe it's because you only play UVA once instead of twice, or Syracuse once instead of twice, and that can make the difference, right?
This is the great thing about conference championship and auto bid trutherism. This is what would be perfect is if we actually had a conference tournament at the end of all of this again, and we could do what matters more, the regular season champion or the tournament champion?
This is the closest thing. This is the closest thing to like the bowls, like system pre-playoff.
There's something much left. Jack knows exactly where I'm going with this, but I'm not sure we can talk about it too much.
Nope.
Oh no, maybe Jack doesn't. We'll talk about it later.
I do now. Yep. Shoot it into the sun.
Let's talk a little bit more about expectations. I think we talked about the schedule, right? The schedule is built to basically baseline. You are getting in the tournament as long as you win the games that you should. We know that. It's really just where do you want to be in the tournament picture? Do you want to host or do you want to be a 2 seed? And it's well within the team's ability and well within the team's power to be a host seed or better, right? I think we've seen that the last couple of years. And to Jake, to your point, it's like, they have built up the benefit of the doubt from every human voting party, right? The NCAA committee, the coaches, the general public, et cetera. They have the program quality.
They've got that, but let's keep in mind they have had the exact same seed in the NCAA tournament the last 2 years, which is the first team to not host. They have gotten effectively the 17th slot. 2 years ago, I think it was far more deserved because they had a late season skid. Last year, I think still not.
It was
totally
just a midseason skid.
It was just a midseason. Yeah,
year.
it's just like that one little bit that throws us off, and then we get paired up. We get lined up with the number one seed in the number one team in the country, and we actually finally got to play them last year in that Nebraska game. But we've been in that same tiny little bubble every time, which is just barely not with the elite of the elites, but clearly ahead of everybody else that isn't that. Also,
the malaise, if you will.
God, we're going to come back to the malaise bit so often. But to your point, and I think we said this earlier too, it's like they're a really solid top 20 team. But the way that the sport is stratified, if you want to be in the Sweet 16, you have to be in the
16. Got to be 16.
You have to be in the. I mean, you have to be. Well, you have to get lucky, right? You have to get lucky with your scheduling, and then and your draws. But you also have to be. You have to be within a top 10 team to guarantee yourself a spot in that.
I'm going to derail the podcast briefly.
Oh boy!
To steal a take from Mike Rooney of the D1 Baseball podcast because
it's
it applies
related,
here.
I assume
it applies in tennis. I would say it applies in women's basketball. There should be 32 hosts. There should be 32 hosts. Expose more people to the postseason. Easy.
So play
every top seeded team. All of them play at home. If you seed it close enough, you can still do it with a day break. Sorry, I want to go see more postseason volleyball. Sorry. Anyways, all that to say, I think saying the schedule is built to almost guarantee a tournament appearance is extremely famous last words because we have said that 3 years in a row, and we have only hosted one of those 3 years. You gotta win the games yourself.
It's critical here. It's guarantee a tournament appearance, not a hosting slot.
Yeah, this is to just baseline is top 64 here. Like that's what
Yeah.
the schedule gets you
Yeah.
into the top 64 on RPI and everything
Your
like that.
performance on the schedule gets you into the top
My
16,
Yeah.
which again is the
my
point.
rage about not seeing postseason volleyball in 3 years just made it go whoosh right over my head.
No, yeah, no,
Right
yeah.
over my head.
There's got
No,
to
to your
be.
point, it's important, right? Like you gain
Yeah.
such a home field advantage from being in that banned box, and also if you want to put it in like very cynical financial terms, maybe you move like instead of you play the first round at O'Keefe, and then you move the second round to McCamish and sell more tickets, right? Like there's a route here where you have the home field advantage and then also make more money. They will probably never put a postseason game in McCamish because it kind of cancels it out. But you get my
Thanks.
point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like there's a lot more flexibility in how much money and how much gate revenue you make if you
They
are able to host, and then also your competitive advantage in the actual game itself.
they
Yeah,
they will
yeah.
need to move it to McCamish if they ever host a Sweet 16 or Elite Eight. Let's hope we're talking about that in
I know.
in
Yeah.
November and we can worry about it then. But like that's why Louisville had to play in Freedom Hall. Anywho, I
All
think
right,
we've
so
all kind of
here's
coalesced in a really similar
Sure.
place,
Yeah.
is what I'm
yes.
reading from all of this.
So, gentlemen, here's my bit, right? I think every time we preview a team, we do like very specific predictions or what's one question that this team needs to answer. And I'm going to drag out the what's one question this team needs to answer bit now. So, for me, as the less educated of the three of us on this team, what is for you one question that this team needs to answer for sure between now and let's say crunch time of the season? So like for me, that's like the last 6 weekends of the regular season. So, Mr. Grant, you're up first.
They got to answer what is middle blocking.
No, I mean it's
It's a
simple,
quick
right?
hitter like that. It's
That
It,
was
that simple. We saw
that
how
was the
this team
problem.
played.
Yeah.
We saw this team played without Mogridge, without the depth. Um, that's something we got to answer. I've kind of talked myself into being a little nervous about this setting the defense in the process of this too. But that's
Defense is
why we
fine. The
play the
defense
games.
will be
So
fine. We had the third highest dig percentage in the country last year. We are fine when it comes to defense. That is not our defense and attack, not the issue. It's those other peripheral. It's the fact we just didn't block for anything last year, and yes, had setting issues, which I think gets into my answer to the question is like, it's the setting for me. It's like, does Emiliano work? If Emiliano works, we are in great shape. We are in great shape. Like we've got a lot of the same. We got a lot of the pieces you need to be super successful. We have the attacking, we have the serving, we have the defense. We the middle blocking in theory will remain healthy this year, and everyone's got more experience. But Emiliano has to be great. Like if Emiliano's not great, or if Suarez isn't great, then we're back into the malaise again. Except a much worse version of it instead of the kind that like we still beat Duke every time. It's just like, all right, well, do we beat the teams that we have to beat, kind of thing.
but
except a
it
much
comes
worse
down to like
version
how
of the
you cover that
malaise.
space, right? Like it comes down to how you cover the space, basically in the center of the. I was going to say center of the pitch, but it's the center of the court,
Yeah,
and
Oh, the
both front and
pitch.
back. So how and not just defensively in terms of like, okay, well, you block really well up front, but also how do you turn digs into attacks, right? And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what your setter is supposed to do: spread the ball around effectively in order to facilitate that. So I feel like I'm saying a lot of things that are very obvious, but I think that's the critical portion, right? It's like, and
yeah.
I think I've said
And
it a couple of times before. It's like they need to be able to spread the ball around effectively and around that. Like if they're going to be bad at blocking, then they need to
yeah,
attack. They need to spread the ball out to the wings and be better on the wings, right?
yeah. I
If
remember.
they're
Yeah,
going to be really
yeah,
good in the center, then they need to have someone that's available to like. They need to do a lot more back row attacks. They need to be able to block in the center and pick up a lot of block luck or make their own block luck, right? Like
yeah. That
it's a lot of the stuff that we saw last season, and like you said, like both of you have said, it's like they just need they can't have if they want to be that top 16 team or not even top 16, a Sweet 16 team, they need to cover these weaknesses, these serious weaknesses that we saw last season that were preventing them, other than for the tournament draw that they got, but that were just preventing them from. I mean, even putting it that way, that were preventing them from avoiding that tournament draw.
Yeah, yeah. Let's be clear. Like by the time they got to the tournament, like they were playing like a top 16 team. Like they were at that level. Everyone had gotten better. Mogridge was back. Suarez had gotten better at setting. Like and D'Amico wasn't the form of herself that got her off the court. Like it was, we were back into a good spot. Um, but yeah, no, I'll be really curious how things look on Saturday. Granted, it's not gonna be like I don't know how much they're gonna do like first team versus second team where we see Emiliano play with the other five that are gonna reliably play the most points. But it's yeah, it's gonna be interesting. They wanted to a little spoiler of the Collier interview. They want people that can do the little things well, like they can take care of the ones that can really do the basics well and work out from there. And they have a lot of that kind of already taken care of with a lot of the returning production, but that's something they would look at when they looked at Velez and looked at Emiliano. It's like, are they doing the things that you have to get done right to be successful? Are they doing them right? And Emiliano has a track record of doing that. So while I do ask that question, I think we'll like the answer when it's all said and done.
So many spoilers, so much foreshadowing.
That was just one. That was just one spoiler.
I think with all of this foreshadowing in tow, it's appropriate time for us to take a quick break and back in a bit.
Yeah, so this podcast is brought to you by Section 103, and summer for them seems to be similar to summer for us, as in August hits and all of a sudden there's a lot of exciting new things to talk about. I personally had seen on my brief Twitter adventures this week, I was preoccupied with other real life endeavors, but I did see that Eric Singleton Jr. NIL shirts were coming out. Awesome. But then I logged on the website today to do some more checking around, poking around. And not only are there Haynes King white youth and women's NIL shirts coming, but also, if you guys remember the like Haynes King, like it was tech-like interview that he gave, that was like the interview of the year last year. Well, now they got a gold Haynes King tech-like shirt as well. Haynes is apparently, that's his signature on the top, but also a nice crown. I think it looks pretty slick. I was like very excited to see that. And this is my candid reaction to opening it and seeing it for the first time. So take a look at that. Free shipping on orders over $80 every day. You can get 10% off using our code FTRS, and check them out at section103.com and at section 103 on Twitter. Exciting new stuff. I like new stuff. So Jack, Akshay, I don't know what you guys think, but I think that's pretty neat.
Mr. Grant, do you know what I think is pretty neat? It's just about football season here on the flats, and there's a couple of news items that have
You
come.
haven't thought football is pretty neat in like 4 years, so this is astonishing.
It's a good segue. They're good segues, Brant. Don't take this away from me. Let me have this one thing.
So, Josh Petty, let's talk.
Let's talk. Josh Petty, the first, at the time of commitment, 5-star in Georgia Tech history. Yes, I have worded that very specifically because if you will remember, almost, what is that, 17, 18, 19 years ago? Basically, it's the better part of a decade ago, or 2 decades ago. Calvin Johnson was also a 5-star, but he was reclassified or re-rated as a 5-star after the fact. He was not a 5-star at the time of recruitment, whereas Josh Petty, 6'5", 265 pounds, interior offensive lineman from Fellowship Christian School in Roswell, is a certified 5-star. He talked a lot about Coach Brent Key and how much he helped out through this process, and gave him a lot of props. It's like made it seem like the sales pitch, that and the NIL and all the package that Tech was able to offer a guy like him who could have gone anywhere else in the nation, knowing that a 5-star offensive linemen are an extremely valuable and extremely concentrated commodity in the recruiting world. It's a fascinating look at what a what the pitch machine looks like coming out of Georgia Tech and how persuasive that is to today's athlete, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've heard people talk. I wouldn't even call it the talk in this regard. I'm just at a point where I don't know if astonished is the right word, but it seems like from everything I've heard, Georgia Tech had a competent and aligned NIL process and recruiting apparatus. And that is, again, we the theme earlier, but it's just refreshing. I'm like eager to see what else happens, right? And this has always been my biggest hang up with recruiting. Like these are high schoolers, right? Like we don't know what's going to happen, but if you can formalize the, hey, we are Georgia Tech. Here's what we stand for. Here's your outcomes that you can get. And here's putting it on Front Street, what you can expect or get from us monetarily, financially, arrangements wise, whatever that is. And you're not being sold a bag of goods in a lot of different ways, but the the financial and that aspect of it, but also just as like a person, like he was noted as a really good recruiter at Alabama, was he not?
I mean,
I'm
yeah,
asking
he
a
was like
question
the
I
number
already
two
know the answer
recruiter in
to,
the
but
nation. Yeah,
yeah,
no.
like
But to your point, I think one of the things that when we went into the former regime, it's like we really keyed, not to make a pun, but we really keyed in on the fact
oh,
that Key was that number two recruiter. And I think a lot of people got burnt out on that.
yep,
One, because the recruiting wasn't there after Jameer Gibbs. And two,
yep,
it's like I think at a certain point, and this has been proven out through some study, it's like the name, like the logo on the chest does a lot of the talking, right? I think
yep.
in an environment where recruiting inducements are effectively illegal, right? Or effectively legal, excuse me. That's the entire opposite of what I meant. Effectively legal. Um,
Yeah.
and where talent is super concentrated. And now, because of that, you are looking at an environment where the upper echelon of teams are probably trying to recruit your top talent and build older rosters rather than younger ones on the whole. Like this kind of ability with younger talent, and yes, this is one guy, and yes, it's the 2025 class, and we can talk about, and yes, like National Signing Day is still like 6 months away. But if you're able to offer this kind of success with this kind of guy that could go again literally anywhere else and provide him this kind of package, I think it's a, even if, God willing he commits, right? But in the case that he doesn't, or God willing that he signs, but in the case that he doesn't, it's a provable model, it's a sustainable model that you can then take to other guys that are of this caliber of talent and keep plying that trade, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, all in all, it's like the most significant part about it is that there's not a lot of nuance to add, I would say, right? Like they
No,
went out, they did the thing, they were effective, they were successful. Boom. Great. Let's do it again. Right?
They beat four teams, three of them who you would not expect to have beaten, right? And then Stanford,
Hmm.
which Stanford is offensive line university, right? Maybe you say all four you would not have expected them to beat. So it's Florida State, Stanford, Tennessee, and Ohio State. Ohio State, Ryan Day mints NFL draft picks across the
Yep.
offense. Florida State, Mike Norvell, especially around that offensive line. I forget the guy's name that runs the offensive line and the offense, but he's been doing a really good job in the post Jimbo Fisher, post Willie Taggart era of really restocking that part of the team, and it's paid
Yeah.
dividends for them, right? Like look at their last couple of years. Tennessee, we know, like it's been a really high powered offense the last couple of years, and yes, for them, Athens is the stumbling block, but they put up video game style offensive numbers a lot under Joe Milton. And a lot of that is due to the offensive line. So you're looking at four teams that recruit offense, maybe not offensive line, but offense really well. And Tech got the recruit.
Yep. And
So
and at the end of the
it
day, that's what you got. That
and
that's a
again,
great
like
that's a great way to end the day, right?
yeah, and again, like caveats, commitment, not signing, et cetera, whatever. But I think to your point and something that you've been trying to impress on me the past, I don't know how many years we've been friends, is like appreciate the little wins and forget about the big picture for a second. It's like
Yeah.
this is a really good, regardless of how it ends up, this is a provable, like this one example, I think sets up a model in which you can rinse and repeat for every single guy that Tech comes across that is of this caliber.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where like obviously results on the field do matter. All of what I'm gonna say is not to disparage that, but like you have to keep that messaging up, even if against a gauntlet Tech manages to go like 5-7 or something like that this year, right? Like that would be it, it's something that you're gonna get recruited against. It's something that, in addition to school and toughness and all that, like you can't let last year be a flash in the pan, like success and vibes and what's the trajectory wise, like even if there is a bump along the road, it's making that sustainable now. I think
And
is the next quest there, but that's a problem for tomorrow or that's a problem for next week, right? Like August 24th is single digit is oh well when this comes out 10 days away, right? Like that is it's something that's gonna have to happen, right? You can recruit to winning, you can recruit to a good education, you can recruit to NIL, but there are always going to be people in people's ears about why that isn't okay or offering other different pitches somewhere else. So, you know, gotta gotta win in all aspects, if you will, which I know
the
is a
last,
tough ask. So,
yeah, the last item that I want to talk about on the Josh Penny thing specifically is this. If you read a little bit between the lines here, this is like an identity play, right?
yep, it
They've had an
absolutely
like
is.
quote, they've
Yep,
had an offense that's successful in the outside zone, which is something I should be proficient in college, end quote. Another one, quote, being able to bring back the old GT, the GT that I watched growing up, the competitive guys like Calvin Johnson catching bombs. It's impressive to see. And Key wanting to do that with in-state players and guys like me and guys all around me, guys that I've grown up with and played against since I was young. I bought in on that and I believe it. He really wants to get this done with Georgia guys, end quote. So the
that was an
identity
interview with
that
Kelly Quinlan, by the way, just for
right,
quotes and
good sourcing,
acknowledgments.
but in that you get two things, right? He likes that the things that they're using in recruiting are offensive identity, which is this interesting like proper spread with a little bit of RPO, and a lot more spread the ball around. I know speed in space is a meme, but like it is kind of speed in space, right? It's get the ball out quickly, find your receivers, and hope that you can like your offensive line can hold so you can get the ball out and find guys that are running like really cutting across the field. It's like he likes that there's an offensive identity, like a standard offensive identity that's really dynamic and plays to his strengths and that plays to the things that he needs to work on in college. And also, he likes the fact that they are committed to doing this with in-state recruits. These are all like three of these things, all three of these things are things that the former regime said that they cared about and then promptly did not do any of them, right?
Yep.
It's so so I think what you led the segment with was there have been people that have talked the talk but not walk the walk. I think what we're seeing here is both of those are in line, right? He's Brent Key is what he's saying he's doing is exactly what he's doing. And you can see some of the results here, especially early on in 2025.
He's refreshing and frank, and I think that resonates with people, especially in a context of where recruiting in any sport or in any facet is, people trying to get you to do something or commit to something or be a part of something. He tells it like it is, and I fully believe, based on everything I've seen, that he is doing the same for these young men. So hopefully it keeps
It's
at
good
it.
stuff. It's
Yeah.
good stuff. I think next week is going to be our big football preview show with
Yes,
former
with
blog manager Joey Weaver, who will join us, and also AJC beat writer Chad Bishop will also be on the call to talk Georgia Tech football in all facets and
you
all.
can't You can't have much better than those two guys. If we're considering that, they're definitely on the Mount Rushmore of Georgia Tech knowers, not the exclusion of any other wonderful faces and folks that we love to consume the content of. But
They're,
um,
they're Al Michaels and John Madden here, and I think it's going to
sure.
be it's gonna be a good time having a conversation with them.
Before we
Before
go,
we go out the door, do you want to do
I've
some
got
trivia?
August. I've got August trivia specifically.
This is gonna be fun. This
I've been
is gonna
sitting
be
on
fun.
I've been sitting on a tidbit that's in this for years, since I started digitizing this data. So probably at least 2 years. I've been waiting for an opportunity to break it out. Obviously, not a lot of sporting events happen in August. I'm sure you can guess which sport of Georgia Tech has played the most August events.
Uh, Football? Well, it's
No,
either football or volleyball.
it's volleyball. They're 58 and 14. Non-con
They played
volleyball season has
they
been,
play four
uh,
games in August. I don't even know why I said football.
yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah, and some of those are exhibition that I do have those in there, but in terms of official games at 58 and 14, it's an 806 winning percentage. They're really, really good. Most of those games have come post that most of the August games that Georgia Tech has played have come post 90s, right? Football schedules has gotten longer and longer over the years. Football did start playing some August contests right around 1990. That is why Bobby Ross is officially 0 for 1 all time in August. Let me tell you, looking at this
wow.
list, you're either real good in August or real not. Of course,
Is that
Michelle
the year?
Collier is. Oh, go for it.
Was No, sorry. Was Ross the year that they played the like August bowl game?
Yep.
It was like in
In East
91
Rutherford.
versus in
Yep.
East Rutherford versus it was Penn State,
Against,
right?
I thought it was Syracuse, maybe, but
I
um,
swear it's Penn State, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. I
all,
remember it was
all,
in the
all
Meadowlands
time, do you know the coach that's played the most games in August?
in
All
August.
sports put together.
All sports put together. I mean, it wouldn't be Ross. It wouldn't be. I mean,
All
it's got to be
sports
one
put
of the
together.
volleyball coaches. Oh, all
Yeah,
sports.
it's got to be.
Oh,
The top three are all volleyball coaches. It's really a guess of who's number one.
it's not Collier, I don't think.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is.
She's 28 and 4 in August. 28 and 4 in August for an
I'm
875
so
win
good at
percentage.
trivia. It's like this is
Tanya
my job.
Johnson, for all of her faults, was dismissed. Not as good as the subsequent regime or the previous. Tanya Johnson went 14 and 1 for the second most games played in August, actually tied with Bon Szymanski, who was playing harder schedules to be sure, who went 11 and 4. But the real kicker is the man at number 4. And I know for a fact that you will never guess who this guy is. Do you
And
want to know why?
it's not volleyball and it's not football.
It's not volleyball and it's not football. There's a third match-based sport that has played games in August.
Match-based sport. So it's tennis.
They do have some fall games in there, but traditionally those are not head-to-heads.
Match-based
And they do have fall ones, so they do have some fall matches. But it is
golf.
a head-to-head sport.
It's not
It's a
golf.
sport that's normally played over the summer in a professional
Uh,
context. It was this
tennis.
man's first season coaching the team. If I told you, I believe if I told you either his successor or his predecessor, you might guess it. Actually, successor almost certainly. The guy who succeeded him, maybe
Played
not.
over the summer professionally. I mean, that's like what gets played over the summer. Lacrosse? No. I mean, if you were saying profess successor, they wouldn't be lacrosse.
I'll give you somewhat of an edgewise hint. This sport did not field teams in the two previous years.
in the two previous.
prior to
So,
this specific year.
oh my, this is going to be one of the war years, the sports that were
They
in the
did
war
not
years.
play any conference games this year either, but they were in a conference at the time in other sports. I'm gonna let
So
you
it would
twist
have
in the
had
wind a
to.
little longer, just for everyone who's listening. I have a way to
This
get
is
there.
great audio, by the way. This is just
So
me
it's a
in
men's team.
serious mental pain.
It's
That doesn't help me.
there's somebody screaming into their phone right now. A professional sport played over the summer. Men's sport.
Professional men's sport over the summer. Is it an Olympic sport?
Akshay, it's baseball. It's
Oh,
baseball. Georgia Tech
what?
baseball went 9-2 in August of 1946. Coach Joe Petard squad went 10-2. They played no SEC games this year because the season had been delayed due to so many troops coming back from being in active service that they could not field a season or a team in spring of 1946. They opened on July 31st for their 1946 spring, aka summer season against Dutch's Bakery on July
Does
31st.
that bakery still exist, by the way? Because that sounds like a place I would want to go.
I don't know. I'm kind of interested. I didn't have a chance to look it up before this, but they
Dutch's
played
Bakery. Is it spelled Duchess or what? Or like a Dutch possessive?
DUTCH''S. They won 12-4, by the
Dutch's.
way. And this was at home.
It does not exist.
Dang.
That is
Well,
tough.
They beat Dutch's Bakery. They played UGA 4 times, and they went 4-0, sorry, against UGA. Eventually got out to 10-0 after beating Chicopee Mills, Covington Mills, and North Georgia twice before losing to Marietta and Chicopee Mills to close the year. They finished 10-2 in their first year back after a 2-year war-related break. Again, that's Joe Petard. He was preceded by Roy Mundorf, who coached a variety of teams, including Georgia Tech baseball, and he was succeeded by Jim Luck, who coached 20 years of Georgia Tech
Yeah, you were
baseball,
right. If you had
following
given me Jim
Petard's
Luck,
16 seasons.
if you'd given me Jim Luck, I would have immediately had it, but that's too easy. I feel like
Yeah. Did you earn it? Do you feel like you earned that question?
I don't feel like I earned it. I feel like my brain hurts. That was tough.
Which also means that Georgia Tech has played more August baseball games than August football games, and has a better win percentage in those games.
That's a tweet. That's a tweet waiting to happen right there.
And Jack will never know the answer to this trivia that I was teasing all afternoon.
Yeah,
Or
that's
you could
true.
just grind the tape. But yeah,
He could grind the
1946,
tape.
World War II sports. Very, very strange results.
I gotta say, I was not expecting that one.
Also, for the record, among football, because I did tease that baseball had played more games with those 11. Football is 5-3 all time in August. Collins, Ross, 0-1. You've got George O'Leary 1-0, Chan Gailey 1-1, and good old Coach Paul Johnson at 3-0 all time in August. He's the only coach that has coached more than one game and is undefeated in the month.
Classic. Paul was good at many things. Apparently, August football is one of them. I don't.
They weren't expecting it yet,
It's too early. But Mr. Grant, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for stumping me so wholeheartedly with that trivia question. And I'm going to have to think about how much I know about Georgia Tech athletics for the next week. But next week, like I said, Joey Weaver and Chad Bishop will join the podcast to preview the 2024 football season. Mr. Grant, where can the people find us in the meantime?
As ever, you can find us at fromtherumbleseat.com. You can email us fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at FTRSblog, at JakeGrant98, and at Jack Nicholas. You can find Section 103 there as well, at Section 103 and Section103.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at From the Rumble Seat, and you can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold or distributed. Please tell your friends. Person-to-person interaction is the number one way to pass along what we do, and we really do appreciate your efforts there. And in the meantime, till we speak next week. Good night, good luck, and go Jackets.